We are into the last moments of Job's response to God. If you were here last week, you know that the famous questions began to be put to Job, one after another. 65 plus questions. Were you there? Did you this? Were you there? Did you see this? I don't know how Job felt, but he probably felt like somebody who stumbled on the first question of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I don't know if you've ever seen that show and somebody gets to those first few throwaway questions that they're supposed to know the answers to, and then they stumble on them and have to live the rest of their lives completely mortified and embarrassed. Which drink is made from the plant, from the leaves of a plant? Milk, orange juice, coffee, tea. Milk, for sure, it's milk. Then you go home and you're forever embarrassed that you had no foggy clue. I think that's how Job must have felt. One question after another. And they came in a pattern, if you will, to kind of draw Job's attention to creation. The first line of questioning came along from chapter 38. Can you explain my creation? You remember, God talked about the sea, creation of the world initially. Did you measure it out? Do you know the distances between things? Did you make all the parameters correct? Did I ask for your advice? Do you know how the sea is controlled? Do you understand how the tides work? Do you understand that the waves are actually under my control? Do you understand the laws of nature? Who wrote the laws of nature that water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius and it becomes frost? Who made snow? Where is snow kept? Where is next year's snowfall? Where is the hail that I'm going to send the next time I send it? Where is it now, Job? Where is it possible for you to understand how it is that I pick up a lake and carry it across to the desert and drop it down on dry land? Can you speak to the clouds and make it rain? Can you control the lightning and the thunder? Who has put wisdom in the inner parts or given understanding to the mind? Who wrote the laws of nature that cause things to happen the way they do? Why do birds migrate? How is it that dolphins know what season to be in what waters? How does this happen, Job? Do you know anything about this? Can you explain my creation? And then he moved from there to question him in regard to governing creation. Remember, he asked him about the wild goat. Do you know anything about the gestation period of an animal that you don't milk, that's not domesticated, that you don't grow for food or have farm in any way? You know nothing about this thing. Why does it exist if it's not there for you? The wild donkey that runs free, that does nothing for anybody except just, it's never been trained, it's never been domesticated. Why does this animal exist, Job? The wild ox that is such a brute of a beast that it could do great things for humanity in industry and building and plowing and all that it could do, and yet you can't even get it to come in to your barn and eat from your manger. Why does this animal exist? The ostrich, what a strange bird. Why did I make it so bizarre looking and with such strange behavior? The wild horse. Job, why? Why are things the way they are? And what God was saying to Job in essence is, if you cannot understand the inner workings of the created order, then how can you understand why God allowed calamity into your life? You understand from the context of the book, and I know we're at the end, but that's what this is about. Job has declared that he has found a problem in God. He has decided that in fact God has made a mistake. And God's response to Job is to point to him, not to give him the reasons for his suffering, but to ask him the questions about the universe. Interesting approach. Chapter 40, verses 1 and 2 hold some important words to us. The Lord said to Job, this is at the end of his questioning, round 1. Shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? He who argues with God, let him answer it. Verse 2, the first phrase of verse 2 is really a key phrase. And if you don't mind just keeping your mind alert for just a few moments, if I can lay this out for you so that you understand this simple phrase, the rest of the text that we look at in chapters 41 and 42 will make far more sense, because this is the hinge on which everything hangs. God asks this question, shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? This is the crux of the issue, and this is exactly the crux of our issue. A couple words here that I need to pull out and give you a little bit of understanding of why they're there and what this means exactly, so we can appreciate this. I don't need to tell you probably that fault finder in its most plainest definition, are you ready for this, means to find fault. Now to understand this, it's not just to say, I found a typing error on a page that you wrote, or you know, your eyebrow hairs need to be trimmed today before you go out into public. There's a little thing that needs to be tweaked. This is not a little fault. The idea behind this word is that there is a glaring deficiency. There is a significant error. There is a problem that cannot be overlooked. There is a serious situation, and it has with it a legal connotation. That the fault is in such a way with somebody that I have become the innocent victim of your fault. And now I am in a position to declare you to be faulty and to call you into court as that you now need to make recompense or respond to the fault against me. I have a legal complaint against you. That's the subtlety of this word. That's in essence what God is declaring that Job is doing. You are, as it were, trying to sue me. You are saying that the wickedness and the evil that you are experiencing is not fair and not right and not good, and I'm in the wrong. And you are calling me you are now a fault finder. You are declaring that there is a deficiency in the way I'm running the universe. That things are not fair and right. And so now you are going to contend. This is the word that we talked about earlier in the book of Job, which we'll look at in a moment. I think it's chapter 13. It means, and it's got the same legal connotation, to argue against in, as it were, to make an accusation, a formal accusation in a court of law. So this is the premise, the language behind what's going on. This is what's happening behind the scene. Make no mistake, this has been what Job has been declaring all along. Job 9, I said chapter 13, I remembered wrong. Job 9, verse 3. If one wished to contend with him, this is the word, same word. If one wished to call God into court and put him on the witness stand, one could not answer him once in 1,000 times. I would never be able to sit in the witness stand and have him drill me with questions. I would never be able to survive his questioning because he's God. But oh, that I could call him to court because he's wrong. Can I just remind you, make this practical for a moment. This is the same argument that is argued today. The mother, pardon me if this applies to you, this is not anybody in this room. I mean to stir up no emotions, but the mother who's sitting in the hospital bed holding on to her stillborn child and looking and asking, why? What a good question. And a seed thought begins to percolate in the heart of an angry person who does not understand what's going on. And have we not all been there in some measure? Have we not all questioned why? It's an honest question. Why is it that a child grows up in a normal family and one day a diagnosis comes down that means that their father has brain cancer, inoperable brain cancer. And when the cancer will be removed, it will leave the father to be paralyzed. He will never walk again. He will remain on the same bed that he will die on. And 4 years later, that's exactly what happens. Why is it that during the time period when all of this drama is happening within this family, that the same family starts to fall apart with a mother who has health problems now with all the stresses that goes on and literally has a stroke that begins to debilitate her, that leads to a heart attack, which leads to a second heart attack, which leads to all kinds of medical problems until she eventually passes away. What kind of a God allows a child to be raised in an environment that is in chaos of medical trauma that leaves them without parents? That is my question, because that's my story. I don't ask this question because I think it's some flippant thing. This is a real life, down-to-earth question, and this is exactly what we do. We contend with God. If I could run the show, this wouldn't have happened. It's not fair, shouldn't have been this way, this is not right, this is not how it should go down, this is not proper, this is not justice, it's not fair. And we want to contend with God. And to this day, there are people who will declare that God does not exist because evil exists, which is an argument that does not stand and does not make logical sense, which will not get into pulling apart. But please don't go down that road because it's utter foolishness. It's an emotional reaction. It's not a logical reaction. You can't even have evil if God does not exist. We won't get into the philosophy of that question, of that comment. But we want to contend. We want to argue. And sometimes feel we have the right to make a case that God has not been fair and treated me justly. This is what Job has said. Oh, that had one to hear me. Oh, this is him talking about a court scene. Oh, that somebody would listen to my case. What is going on with me is not just. Here's my signature, he says. Chapter 31, verse 35, Job. Here's my signature, let the Almighty answer me. Now, Job has pictured in his mind, this is just a metaphor, it's not a literal signature. It's like he's signing the document, okay? I am now going to sue God. My signature is now on the document that has declared that he is in the wrong. That's what he's saying. Here's my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. And if he doesn't answer me, his silence and his fear to appear in court will vindicate me. If he doesn't answer, which he hasn't said a word all the way through the book of Job until we get to verse 38. If he doesn't say anything, then I know I'm in the right. Let him answer. Job feels so confident. Oh, that I had the indictment written by my adversary. If only I had the crime that I had done. If only I could know what I had done. If only I could see why it is that I'm being punished, and I can't. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder. I feel so right about this. I'm going to sign this document, and I am going to walk around the town like a proud man. I'm going to show everybody that I am right and God is wrong. I am going to be so pleased with myself, I would wear this thing on my head like a crown and walk around like royalty because I know I'm right and God is wrong. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder. I would bind it on me as a crown. I would give him an account of all my steps. I can declare my innocence. I can be totally transparent. I will explain every moment, every thought, every word, every deed. I can prove my innocence. Just let me. And I would, like a prince, I would walk into court with my head held high, not like a criminal who might feel embarrassed that somebody might see him or know that their mother's in court and doesn't want to meet her eyes. No. I am going to walk in like I am the king of the world and I deserve justice because God is wrong and I am right. And that is the position of the proud heart of man that does not know the sovereignty of God and will not submit to a God who controls everything. I'm right. This is wrong. It has passed through my grid, my personal opinion on justice, and so this should not happen. And it's not fair. Well, God has an answer for Job. And God has a response to every human proud heart that wants to call him into court for not behaving the way they think he should behave in regards to calamity and wickedness and evil. The Lord said to Job, shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? He who argues with God, let him answer it. Then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? Now, the word small account, the phrase small account is an interesting one. It means to be light. Not light as in the opposite of darkness. Light as in the opposite of heavy. I am of no account. I am insignificant. I suddenly see your world and realize that my little puny life, while you're trying to balance the stars in the universe, and you're feeding all the animals in the world, and you're keeping everything spinning, and all the sun rotating, and all that's going on with the tides, suddenly I realize that I am pretty much trivial in compared to the entire universe. I realize I'm small. What am I supposed to say? Job has waited for the moment to speak, and now he is cut short and silent because his soul has been gripped with the character of God. That is the answer to suffering. It is found in the character of God. I lay my hand on my mouth. This is a sign of humility, a sign of astonishment. Doesn't mean literally he does this, but that's the picture. I'm not going to speak anymore. Spoken once, I will not answer. Twice, but no further. I've already said too much. But you notice what's missing in this? What's missing is that Job does not repent. Job does not recant of his position. All he does is say, I'm not going to say another word. And so, get ready for round 2. God now speaks to Job in another vein. He now begins to ask him the questions, can you subdue my creation? Chapters 41 and 42. Remember, Job's looking for an answer for his suffering. And all he gets is a depiction of animals. What is that about? God is drawing Job to a place of humility that admits that Job, you are not in control of this world. And he does this through 2 great beasts. Job 40 verse 6, the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, dress for action like a man. I mentioned this last week, same phrasing from chapter 38. This is a wrestling phrase. It means gird up your loins, put your robe in a position where we're going to go at it. Get ready. Dress for action like a man. This is serious stuff. Here are the rules. I'm going to question you and you answer me. You make it known to me. We're not physically wrestling, we're wrestling for ideas. Will you even put me in the wrong? You still declare that I have been unjust. You still declare that you're innocent. Will you condemn me that you can declare your innocence, that you may be in the right? Is that what you're still doing? Job has not abandoned his position. So, here's a challenge. Have you an arm like God? Can you thunder with a voice like his? Now, you think you're in charge? Here's my call to you, Job. Put on your regal robes. Adorn yourself with majesty and dignity. Clothe yourself with glory and splendor. Go ahead. You think that you can run the show better than I do? You think you know how things should look and how things should behave? Then you be God for a moment. You go ahead. Do that, Job. Well, Job knows he can't. Clearly. Here's the challenge. Put on your glorious, regal, majestic robes, Job, and you be God. And you show me what your justice should look like. Pour out the overflowings of your anger. Look on everyone who is proud and abase. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. Go ahead, Job. Show us how you would do that if you were God. Tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them all in the dust. That's a euphemistic expression for death, right? You go to dust, you put them in the ground. Hide them all in the dust together. Bind their faces in the world below. Then will I also acknowledge to you that your own right hand can save you. If you could act like God, then and only then are you in a position to tell me that I am unjust. You are never in a position to say and declare the phrase, that's not fair, to a God who knows everything far more than you do. You may feel that way, and I know we do. But to truly reach a position where that is a stance with us is nothing more short of absolutely wrong. It reshapes God into a false image, and it completely misrepresents his character. In order to bring Job to this humility, he introduces him to 2 animals, Behemoth and Leviathan. I just have to tell you that this is one of the most intriguing passages in all of the entire Bible. If you know anything about this passage, this has been debated, discussed, and wrangled with for millennia. That's not an exaggeration. The animals that are being discussed here are to this day in dispute. There are people who will tell you emphatically what it is, and you will find somebody else who tells you emphatically the exact opposite of what this animal is. The bottom line is, and we'll look at this in a minute, I don't want to get distracted by this. I don't want to get distracted over what these animals are, because we don't need to know what they are to get the point of the passage. And that's really what I want us to see. Job is learning the lesson of why you can't contend with a God who knows all. And so God borrows animals that we may not know what they are. Fine, we have very good guesses. But the point is still clear, so don't stumble, don't miss the trees for the forest, or whatever expression I'm trying to use. You can understand what I'm trying to say. What are these things? Behemoth. The word behemoth is a strange word. The word behemoth is actually a plural word for cattle. Now, just so you know this, cattle is already a plural word. So you don't put an S on the end of cattle. That's not proper grammar. That's what behemoth is. It's cattles, basically, in its most wooden translation. And it means a super cow, a super beast. It means the top of the food chain. That's what we know. That's as close as we get. Now, the best guesses we've had over the centuries has been the elephant. And when you read the text doesn't quite fit the elephant in some degrees. One of the most popular to date, one of the most popular opinions on behemoth is what is this thing? A hippopotamus. Almost said rhinoceros, but it's not. But when you read the word, it doesn't quite fit fully with the idea. But the point is, it's a creature unlike anything else. In fact, there's a phrase in this little passage, Job 40, he is the first of the works of God. The first of the works of God. That is to say, behemoth is the greatest, not first in order, first in supremacy. It is the greatest, biggest, fiercest land animal that I have made. That doesn't quite sound like a hippopotamus. It sounds more like, and when you read the text, it makes you think more along the lines of a sauropod, an extinct animal. Something that actually from the description, it makes far more sense into the reading. And not to get all scientific here, because you know I'm not, but it is known and has been discovered things within dinosaur fossils that give the indication or some measure of direction that the timeline that is very common within our naturalism of the age is just straight up wrong. We found blood cells and sinew and stuff that long since should have decayed. It is entirely possible that dinosaurs lived with man. I know that's a crazy statement because it sounds so ludicrous, but I'll leave it there. It's possible, and I'll just leave it for you to digest and think for yourself, that behemoth is actually just a sauropod. It doesn't matter. Let's not get hung up on this. You can still read the text without knowing what the animal is. And we could spend our time discussing what we think it is and come up with our conclusions. It's not important for the day. Leviathan. Most common today thought is that Leviathan is an alligator. Not a crocodile, an alligator. It kind of fits the description, but not quite. Historically, it is often thought that Leviathan is just a whale. Again, it does not fit the text well enough to truly be a whale. And interestingly enough, the only thing that really fits the text is an ancient, historic, and now extinct plesiosaurus. That fits the text almost verbatim. What this is, I can't say with any accuracy, with any honesty. The text doesn't tell us the name. We have good guesses. I happen to lean on the side of saying these are extinct, real extinct animals. The text in verse 4, chapter 41 says, on earth there is not like his a creature without fear. That's not an alligator in my mind. I've heard sermons preached. It's an alligator and it's a hippopotamus. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But the word Leviathan, by the way, I need to tell you this. The word Leviathan is predated to the book of Job. And this is one of the reasons that it's confusing. The word Leviathan is predated in the ancient Near East as a mythological seven-headed sea monster. So it's very prevalent to preach this text, so you know this, as these creatures, and I mean this from a completely biblical perspective, not a liberal perspective, that these creatures are just mythological and used in regards to the cosmic forces. That Leviathan is the Leviathan of the ancient Near East, and it's just a creature that doesn't actually exist. It's another line of thinking. And this is, I say, one of the most controversial, not in a great strictest sense, but an interesting and intriguing passage in all of the Bible. These chapters are debated and wrestled with and wrangled with, and you will spend the rest of your life within them if you would like to. Having said that, that was an aside, all of that, just to lay the groundwork. Let's at least look at the text a little bit, because this is the point. Okay, let's not get distracted. What's the point? Job, you're contending with me. Your heart needs to be humbled. You think you're right. You're sure I'm wrong. You can't run the universe. Then behold Behemoth, this great land animal, which I made as you. So it's a real creature in my mind. I made this animal like I made you. He eats grass like an ox, so he's a herbivore, which, by the way, fits perfectly with sauropods and everything that you're about to read. Familiar text, we read it already this morning. I'll just read it quickly. Behold, his strength is in his loins. There's subtlety in the Hebrew here. I just said I'd read it quickly, and already I'm pausing. But you need to know that there's a subtle, without getting too graphic here, this has something to do with the mating of the animal, let's just say politely. Okay, there's strength in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. Dual phrase. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. This does not sound like a hippopotamus. The sinews of his thigh are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like bars of iron. And I'm not going to get distracted here, but I have to tell you that the bones of a sauropod are actually hollow, hard as rock, and light as styrofoam. Fascinating creature that happened to exist by itself. Okay, that was sarcasm. Chapter 40, verse 19. He is the first. This animal is the greatest of all of land animals. There's a point to all this. Job's just pointing out. God's pointing out, to Job. Consider this animal. He's the greatest animal. Let him who made him bring near his sword. Who is the only person that can approach this animal with a sword? It's the one who made him. Who is the only person that can slay this animal, Job? You know the answer. It would be me, Job. Have you ever tried to kill one of these, Job? It cannot be done. For the mountains yield him food. Who feeds him? Nobody. Where all the wild beasts play, nobody goes near him. Under the lotus plants he lies. In the shelter of the reeds and in the marsh, he nestles himself down into the swamp. For his shade, the lotus trees cover him. The willows of the brook surround him. Sort of sounds like a hippo, but not. Behold, if the river is turbulent, if the flood season comes, and the water rises and begins to rush like a torrent, and we know what that looks like in spring in Muskoka, and the water looks ridiculously frightening that you'd never stick your toe in, let alone your canoe, what does this animal do? He's not frightened. He's confident, though the Jordan rushes at his mouth. He just opens his mouth and just swallows the water like it's no big deal. Can one take him by the eyes or pierce his nose with a snare? Can you go near this land animal? Can you draw out Leviathan? Now we're into chapter 41. Let's look at this quickly. Can you take your little fishing hook and throw it with your worm on the line and you think you're going to catch this thing, Job? Or press down his tongue, that's to capture him, to put a rope around his lower jaw as you would an alligator, to pull him and keep him from biting you. Can you press down his tongue with a cord or put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you in soft words? This is sort of the idea that you're so frightening that you approach this animal and now he's whimpering, he's cowering. He's asking you, please don't hurt me, please don't hurt me. Is that going to happen, Job, to Leviathan? Picture a fierce animal, whatever. It helps, I know, when we know what it is, but we don't feel we do. I don't feel confident enough to say with absolute clarity. I have my opinions, but will he speak to you with soft words? Will he make a covenant with you? Can you train him so that he's going to listen to your voice? Here, boy. Is he going to do that for you? To take him for your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you put him on a leash for your girl? Is he going to be a pet? Will traders bargain over him? Have you ever seen him in the marketplace? Have you ever seen this animal for sale? Have you ever seen anybody dividing this animal up so that you can buy its meat in the marketplace? Have you ever seen that, Job? Never have you? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? There's something about this animal that he's coated with armor. Kind of lets a whale out of the picture. Lay your hand on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. Now, not to go through the text because I don't, you get the gist. Let me just give you the overview of Leviathan. Too strong for hooks, ropes, spikes, and cords, dangerous, will not submit or ask for mercy, will not be domesticated, work as an animal for you, refuse to be trained to be a pet, will never be for sale in the marketplace, it cannot be captured. Its flesh cannot be pierced with harpoon swords or javelins. It frightens the bravest person who approaches it to try and subdue it. Its mouth cannot be forced open. Around its teeth is terror. Its back is armor-plated with tight scales. It sneezes, flashes forth light. That's in the text. This is an animal like nothing we know. Electric eels produce, 650 volts of electricity. Bombardier beetles create a chemical force that allow it to launch itself with a flash almost of lightning. Lightning bugs, we call them sometimes, they glow. Animals are unique in created order. This extinct animal, I think extinct, had some means of mixing chemicals, of doing something, and could actually, it sounds like the idea of, sneezing fire. I don't know what this means, but this is a fierce animal. His sneezings flash forth light. He counts iron as straw and bronze as rotten wood. He will not be chased away by arrows. Clubs and spears and javelins are counted as stubble. His belly is like sharp pot shards, like broken pottery all over his belly. When he crawls, the mud oozes out from under him, it says. When he swims, he makes the sea look like it's boiling. He is the king of all the animals. Read the text for yourself. I'm just giving you a quick overview. And you should. Read the text for yourself. And the point that God is asking Job, he's pointing him to these animals. Job, the greatest land animal, the greatest sea creature. You are asking me to explain why there is evil in the world, why you think I've been unfair to you. You think I've been unfair. My answer to you, look at this big animal. Look at this big creature. What kind of an answer is this? Well, it's obvious. If you, Job, cannot control or subdue these great creatures, how can you expect to control the cosmic forces of wickedness in the world? There's a sense in which, although mythologically we don't read this text, I think these are literal animals, there's a sense in which they do represent some greater cosmic evil. And Job, if you're not in control of these animals, what makes you think you're going to understand how I control the forces of evil? Job, you think that you know what is right. It has passed through your grid, and you think I'm wrong? You know nothing about what's going on. You cannot even control these great beasts. You don't know how they behave. By the way, I mentioned that God was the only one who could slay Leviathan. Psalm 74, verses 12 to 14. Yet God, my king, is from of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. You divide the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness. Leviathan is a known creature in the Bible. The word is not translated into us to this day that we know the name of the animal that is being described. And only God in the scriptures is the only one that has ever killed Leviathan. Leviathan is the king of the beasts. So Job, if you cannot control and subdue these great creatures, how can you believe to understand the inner workings of the way that God uses calamity to fulfill his purposes for his own glory? How dare you think that your situation, when it passes through your personal experience, you can come to reach the conclusion that it's not fair for you, that God is wrong the way he's done this, that it shouldn't have happened to you. You don't even know how the universe works. How do you know what God is doing through the very evil that he's allowed to happen to you? How do you know what the end game is? How do you know the big picture? How do you know what is going to come from the good, from the experience? How could you possibly declare that God is wrong? You are never in a position to make such a claim. God is never wrong. By definition, he's God. He can make the rules, and he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants to, and he's never wrong. That's what happens when you're God. You always do what you want, and you're always right. So it is that we see this text. God has made these creatures for his own purposes, for his own ends. We could pull that into his use of evil, broad-brushed evil. Again, that's just a generic word for all wickedness and everything under the sun. God allows it and uses it for his own purposes and for his own ends, as he does these creatures. He's created them with his own authority. He alone has authority over them. He alone controls them. We could say the same things of the forces of wickedness and of evil. Who came in at the beginning of the book of Job to the presence of God? And what did God say? I give you permission. And by God putting Satan on a leash, and by the way, he's always on a leash. God is always in charge. Satan is just a tool in the hand of God to produce God's ends for his purposes. God has authority even over wickedness. He remains free of it. He's not responsible for it. He is not guilty of it. But when it happens, he uses it, and he allows it, and he remains in authority over it, as he does these animals. And God does all of these things, creates the animals, the wild donkey that frolics, the otter, fun little otter that looks like he's having a great time laughing it up, and nobody cares, nobody sees him. Why does God do this? For his own purposes, for his own enjoyment, for his own glory. Why did he make these giant land animals and sea creatures? Why? I don't know. No, they're not good to us. Why? I don't know, except for the glory of God. Why does God allow calamity in our lives? For his purposes, for his ends, for his glory. Because this is